HBCUs play money games every year. But I never thought about Deion Sanders in Colorado being one of those money games until Michael Vick brought it up. Oh, yeah. It's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day, every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to turbotax.com today and get matched with your expert. We'll wrap up today's episode with a look at the SWAC tournament because it is tournament season and there was a big upset. Grambling over Southern, but Grambling had to get through the play-in game first. Let's break down their upset and the play-in game in segments 2 and 3, but kick this thing off with an interesting premise. Every single year, countless HBCUs will be playing against FBS opponents. It's a money game. We broke it down before. I call it a get money game because the school's getting money. This is your opportunity to make yourself a little bit of money, improve your draft stock if you're a player. So I get it. Every single year, this is just part of being a smaller school, right? But I've never, and I mean not one time, legitimately, not even half a time, have I ever thought about any of those money games being against Colorado. And you would think Deion Sanders leaving Jackson State, going to Colorado, it just makes sense. But at the same time, it never crossed my mind. And maybe that's because to me, I don't think it's the best of business. I'm not overly excited about the idea of having this game. But I'll say this. Michael Vick brought it up, and I said, okay, it's at least worth a discussion. It still didn't make me change too much because I view money games as unexciting matchups. I'm looking for little strings here and there that you can pick at. Hey, this defensive line was pretty stout in the first half, and then they eventually got worn down. When they're going against smaller bodies that you will face on the FCS level, they won't get worn down as easily. Or this player had a really big game against Rutgers, for example. I think that could translate when they're having to face a North Carolina Central. I think like these are things that I look for personally. But the game? No, I'm not looking for the game. It's almost like an all-star matchup of sorts. Because in all-star matchups, I'm only looking for certain traits from certain players. That's how I look at these money games. I'm not looking to see can so-and-so compete. So when Michael Vick made this comment, when Michael Vick made this comment about it, it got me thinking. And this is a long quote, so forgive me for as long as I have to read. It's a possibility. But you know what? It would have to make all the sense in the world. You know, I spoke to Deion Sanders about these types of games and scheduling big-time games for the school. You just want to be cautious when you're doing that, because I could take out the but we'll see if I do it. You want to be cautious when you're doing that. You don't want to put the kids in a bad situation. Obviously, it helps the school out, and we'll pick and choose our spots and what's the right team to play before I put them in a situation where it's a detriment to them. And when we do, when we finally schedule that game, we'll be ready to play that game and be competitive in that game. A lot of that's a lot of filler, but here's the thing. Most times HBCUs are not competitive in that game. Most times FCS schools are not competitive in those games. This is not a game for you to go there and be competitive. I know we want to do it. It's the desire. Don't get me wrong. So I wouldn't say that's not what it's meant for, But that's not what typically happens. What typically happens is you get walked over, you get your check, you go home. Hopefully, if you're lucky, a couple of players stood out and their tape will be on film against a Power 4 school, and they'll get noticed, and more scouts will come to your profile, or excuse me, to your campus. That's what you can hope for. But this idea that it elevates the profile of the brand is not an opinion that I share. The idea that Norfolk State playing Colorado would make Norfolk State more accessible, or it gets more eyes on them. No, not to me, not in a positive light, because the truth of the matter is you should be the massive underdog. That game should be a heavy favorited game for Colorado or any other Power 4 school, because here's my deal. The whole Deion Sanders bit of it all is cool until you get to the game, until you get to the 60 minutes of action. And I would love to talk about Deion Sanders returning to an HBCU as an opponent. I think that'd be a cool thing to talk about. It would probably give a lot of great content for the show. So by all means, Vic, schedule that game. But what about once the seconds start ticking, right? Like, what about once it goes from 15:00 to 14:59, 58, 57, 56, 55? Like, when that happens, are we still having fun? You know, it's like Denzel said, ain't fun no more, is it? Nah, it's not. So from that department, I'm not looking forward to this game. I think that it provides interesting storylines, things to talk about going in. But walking out of it, I think there was probably 3 HBCUs where this would make some sort of sense if he was going to come back and do it at all. And I don't even want to say come back, because it almost sounds like charity, but there's a check involved, so there's a payment. But anyway, Deion Sanders in Colorado versus now Michael Vick in Norfolk State, because of all of the guys who are a part of this class, if you want to call it that, Vick is the one with the next highest superstar status. Like, I don't think it's close to Deion's, but it is. He has a high superstar appeal. Let's not get that confused. Michael Vick is a star in a way that not a lot of NFL players have ever been in my lifetime. He's the video games. He's Madden 04, you know, like all of these things make sense. He's probably the first of my age, right? Like, mind you, I wasn't around for a lot of the OGs, the Cunninghams. I wasn't around for the Doug Williams. Like, I wasn't around for a lot of them. But as far as black quarterbacks of my age range, Michael Vick was the guy. It was Michael Vick. And there's other people in there. Of course, you know, you got Donovan McNabb, but it was Vick, Cam, Lamar, and Mahomes, right? Like that. I feel like that was the natural progression, because even Dante Culpepper, who was a really good player, it wasn't Vick and it wasn't Cam. There was a certain dynamic. There is a certain dynamic aspect when it comes to those two players. There's a certain dynamic aspect when it comes to Lamar. There's a certain dynamic aspect when it comes to Patrick Mahomes, where even though we're getting more black quarterbacks, there is something different. There's the dynamic aspect of Mahomes is how successful he is. The dynamic aspect of Lamar Jackson is watch the freaking film, right? So I think that even as we're getting more black quarterbacks, those are certain stars that rise to a different level. And with Michael Vick going against Deion Sanders, yeah, we could talk about that, the star power of it all. We could talk about the fact that Deion Sanders probably does mentor him through certain steps along this journey. I'm sure he's called prime. But what happens when the clock starts ticking? It's not a special game to me. Maybe some special moments within it. So you have Vick. I think that Eddie George with Tennessee State would have been interesting, especially because they began to build themselves up as an FCS platform. They were kind of the first 2 of this generation's lesser experienced coaches to make it up. So I think that would have been interesting. Jackson State versus Deion in Colorado, I would never do it. I think it makes a lot of sense from a who were you a coach of? If you're going to pick an HBCU, go back to the team you were a coach of, right? No, because Colorado's going to smash Jackson State in that situation. And I think that there will be a conversation. That's the one game where people will talk about what happened in the game. So I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of that. Of course, leading up to it, crazy storylines, especially if for some crazy reason, Jackson State was the home team. Which I don't think would happen in football. It's happened in basketball, but it wouldn't happen in football. But Nah, maybe Alabama A&M because his daughter goes there. I'm just reaching at this point. But anyway, the point is, this is just a regular Power 4 versus FCS school once the clock starts rolling. And for that reason, I'm not overly excited about it. I think that if Colorado made this decision, it wouldn't be Colorado making this decision. I think it would be Deion Sanders saying, I want to make this call. Like, I think he would be the one who pointed it out. So salute to him. I think he said some positive things here and there about HBCUs as of recently. I think that it's kind of been a little bit more discussed on his part. So I don't know if this doesn't move me. I don't even want to say I don't know. This doesn't move me, but it is an interesting discussion. Interesting discussion, especially if it ends up being a big payday. I do think it could look a certain way for Deion if the money is very high. I don't think that he's struggling in the PR department. I think that everything that was ill will with the Jackson State and all of that contention that happened when he left, I think that's behind him now, right? Like, I think some people still feel away, some people don't, but I don't think that that's really part of his story anymore. I don't. I think you could write the story of how he left shortly, his time while he was there, you would definitely write about at a great length. But that whole dissension between him and HBCU fans, that I think that's a footnote in his coaching career at this point. Not even really worth discussing. But it would be discussed if he came back. So yeah, make it happen, Vic. Make it happen and give me something to talk about. But anyway, let's keep rolling and get into some of this basketball. Grambling, I see GSU with a big time upset over your rivals, Southern. Let's break this all down as we continue with Locked On HBCU. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you just stop managing your money and start building wealth. Listen, when I started using Monarch, I realized I'm spending a lot more money than I thought I would on food deliveries. Now I budget smarter, I spend smarter. So if I were you, I would take control of your finances with Monarch Money and use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. Are you looking to maximize and optimize your nutrition this year? If you are, Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just in 2 minutes. With over 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every week, you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle, whether it's calorie smart, protein plus, or keto. Plus, Factor even offers some wholesome smoothies, breakfast, and grab and go snacks to keep you fueled all day long. I love how Factor takes the stress out of the whole meal prepping process because I don't need to make a decision on what to cook, when to cook it. All I need to do is decide when to order it because it only takes 2 minutes once it gets here. And as a busy person, I appreciate that. Eat smarter with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 off. Use the code lockedoncollege50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code lockedoncollege50 off at factorsmeal.com/lockedoncollege50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day. Every day for your second listen, Locked On NFL. It's the big week, first week of NFL free agency. The deals can finally become official as of yesterday at 3 o'clock Central Time. So make sure you're checking out Locked On NFL for all of the biggest news and all of the biggest stories. That being said, the biggest story in HBCU basketball, big-time upset that Grambling pulled off over Southern. And they sent this message on Twitter that I thought was absolutely phenomenal. After Grambling beat their rival Southern, that didn't hurt things, right? You're knocking off your rival. But after Grambling knocked off their Southern rival, or the rival Southern, Grambling put this message up on Twitter and said, regular season titles are cool, but the defending champs just sent you back to Baton Rouge. I love it. I love it. Talk that talk to your rival, but really just talk that talk, period. Right? Like talk that talk, period. Grambling is the defending champions. And I know they walking around feeling like this is my house until it isn't. So when Southern comes in and they win a regular season title and they're clearly the best team overall this season, 15-3 record, you're feeling good. But don't forget, you stay in state with the team who runs this conference, and that is the Grambling State Tigers. So when they say regular seasons are cool, yeah, we won a regular season title. Cool. That's cool. I ain't tripping off of that. But the defending champions just sent you back home. Because don't forget who we are. Y'all ain't the champs yet. And that's kind of a sentiment that I've always given. Grambling telling Southern the regular season titles are cool, but the defending, in all caps, the defending champs just sent you back to Baton Rouge. It tells you exactly where we stand because it's a sentiment I share. All that regular season stuff, that don't really matter. It's cool. You want to have a number one seed. It's great. But once you get in the dance, let's dance. And I think that Grambling's victory kind of shows me something that I saw with TSU. And I know I love bringing this up because I'm a homer or whatever. But I love bringing up that TSU won as an 8 seed because, yes, it's a prideful thing for me as a Texas Southern alum. But also, I think it's a testament that past success does matter. Knowing how to win when the championship rounds are going, it matters. You look at UFC, rounds 4 and 5. Some guys don't have the stamina to go the distance. Some guys don't know how to operate when it's really go time. Grambling said, we won it all last year. Y'all won a regular season title. That's not the same. Let me show you the difference. And Grambling did it. That was a hectic game. That was an insane game. But Grambling came out with the victory. It was one in which Lewis Hutchinson had 2 big-time threes, one at the end of regulation or towards the end of regulation, and then one towards the end of overtime. 2 big-time threes by 24. And that was not even the most hectic moments. Not even, because Grambling had to climb back out of a deficit of about 12 points. And then when they get up 2 points with about 15 or so seconds left, you're thinking, hey, just be poised. Just get the ball. Be cool. Take your free throws. Knock down 2 is a 4-point game. We can play the free throw game forever. But then Grambling ends up hitting the deck. Dozier ends up hitting the deck. And what was difficult about that is you hit the deck and you don't want to get a jump ball. I'm assuming, because I was at work when all this happened, but I'm assuming that Southern must have had the possession arrow. So you don't want to get into a jump because then you know it's going to go straight to Southern, right? So instead, he kind of just throws the ball. He's on the ground, sitting down, and he throws the ball up. The ball goes straight to a Southern player. There was no Grambling guy in sight. He was obviously just throwing the ball to get rid of it. Not what I would want to do when I'm up 2 points. Mind you, I'm up 2 points in the day and age where everybody wants to shoot threes. That would have been a risky move to take the 3, but it could have delivered. Anyway, Southern ends up grabbing the ball, throwing it up. About 2 seconds left, they end up getting a dunk. Excuse me, I really got something in my eye. I don't know what that's about, but Southern ends up getting the dunk, and they take it to OT, and it was just a hectic moment. But the point is, Grambling comes out with that victory in overtime. So now Southern, after going 15-3, it doesn't matter anymore. And it's funny because I know they wanted to get their hands on Alabama State. Texas Southern and Alabama State play on that side of the bracket in the quarterfinals. I know that Southern wanted to get their hands on Bama State, and Bama State probably wanted to get their hands on Southern because Southern has 3 losses this year, or they had 3 losses until they lost to Grambling, but they had 3 losses in the regular season. 2 of them came against Bama State. So I know Bama State like, yeah, we got them. We got their number. And I know Southern like, we ain't going to let them think they got a number. So they were probably both itching to play each other. Southern just wanted something to prove because if they're competitors in the way that I am, I'm not looking for the team. Like, I think they beat TSU twice. I'm not looking for the team that I beat twice. I'm looking for the team that beat me twice. But maybe that's the problem. They didn't focus on the team they beat twice, which was Grambling. They didn't focus on it. They swept Grambling in the regular season and fell to them in the conference tournament. Then you're looking at TSU. Now let's look at TSU and Alabama State versus Grambling this year. So Grambling was swept by Texas Southern, which they were also swept by Southern. So we know that that does not matter. But I think that I meant to look this up before, but I think that Grambling is a team that actually knocked TSU off last year. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's what happened. Yeah, in the championship game, 75-66. So hopefully TSU can get past Alabama State. Hopefully they can get past Alabama State. And then, like Booker T said, yard talk, we coming for you. But anyway, Grambling split with Bama State this year. So it'll be very exciting. It'll be very exciting to see what happens. We have our first big upset, and I do think that past success matters. You got to know how to win sometimes. But some teams had to win just to get in. That was Southern. That was Grambling. Let's see how the plan was in the first year. How successful were these set of games? I'll break it all down as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On HBCU. This message is brought to you by sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you would get anything back. Then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return. While you get real-time updates on their process, so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every single form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get your money back, the most money you can, guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is taxes. Get an expert today on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Go ahead and go to TurboTax today and make your taxes way more exciting. As wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. How successful were the playing games in 2025? Obviously, we're talking about the SWAC tournament because we haven't gotten into the March Madness playing games, aka the first 4. We haven't gotten into the NBA playoffs playing games, aka the playing games. But this is a question that in general, like how successful are the plans, can only be answered after about 3 to 5 years. Like you need a strong sample size to really determine how you feel about playing games, period. What I can say is if I base it off of how I feel about playing games from the ones I've seen, not in the March Madness, that's different. But if I base my opinion on how I feel about playing games from the NBA playoffs, I think I can come up with a slightly concrete feeling on how I feel about them. I'm not a fan. I'll be honest with you. I'm not a fan of it all because I don't think everybody deserves it. See, we're at a point where all you have to do is finish in a certain place and you're going to be in the playing game. But what if the 10th place team is absolute garbage? What if they're absolute garbage? What if they're so far back from the 9th seed? Should they be rewarded for that? Not in my opinion. Not in my opinion at all. Now, granted, you have certain privileges in the NBA of being dual elimination if you're the 7 or the 8 seed, but in here, I just don't love it because I don't think that everybody deserves to have that opportunity. That is my personal opinion. And then also, I don't think that the 7 seed should be given. And also, let me backtrack real quick. I know that with a conference tournament and basing it off a conference record, there's only so far that people can be behind. So this drastic gap, it probably won't be showcased most times. That being said, I just wouldn't give the 10 seed. I don't think the 7 seed should even have to do a play-in. I think it should just be between the 8 and the 9. Maybe even let the 9 and 10 play and then let the 8 play like they do in the NBA. But for me, just let the 8 and 9 be a play-in. That's it. To each his own, though, right? So how do you determine if the play-in is a success or a failure? On a year-by-year basis until you get a large enough sample size, of course. I think that you need 2 things for the play-in to be successful. You need good games and you need upsets. You got to have both. I think that good games will suffice for a year or two because you can't have an upset every single season. It's just not realistic. But we did have them this year. But you can't have an upset every single season. It wouldn't be a realistic request. And I'm all about realism. If things are unrealistic, then I'm not going to sit here and be like, uh I'm not begging for the 12th seed to beat the 3 seed every single year or something like that. That's just, it doesn't happen. But I think I need it occasionally. And this was one of the years that we got it. So I would say that it was a success this year because you had good games and you had upsets. And quite frankly, the upsets may be more important because if you have good games for 5 years in a row, the basketball lovers will love it. I'm not a basketball lover. To me, if the 7 and 8 seed are making it on every single time, we didn't need to have the 9 and 10 seed involved. I need a couple of upsets to prove why this was necessary. Anyway, so these were the games. You have FAMU versus Mississippi Valley State, the 8 versus the 9 seed, and that's on the women's side. Then you have Bethune-Cookman versus PV, also on the women's side, 7 versus 10. In both of those, the underdog wins. Mississippi Valley State wins, and they get their first tournament victory ever. No, I'm joking. In over a decade. Then you have PV who won, and that's a 7 seed dropping. So all of that's trash. I was talking about 7 seeds not getting in. I don't change it because I don't think that the risk was necessary. I don't think that the 10 seed necessarily earned that. But hey, it paid off, right? So you can't complain. It's one of those things where it's difficult to really showcase you have a gripe when the results are anti what you had a gripe about, you know. Then on the men's side, the favorites won. Grambling knocked off Alabama A&M. That was 8 versus 9. And then you have FAMU who knocked off PV, 7 versus 10. Now, I would say the PV game was close, and it took FAMU a 52-point second half to close it out. But the gap was way closer on the women's side. So the gap between 7 to 10, it wasn't that wide. So the idea of the 10 seed winning wasn't unfounded. Matter of fact, I think 8, 9, and 10 all had the same record. So 8 and 9 going either way nothing about that was surprising. If you told me, hey, one side had play-ins win, the other side had play-ins lose, or the underdogs win, the underdogs lose, I would be able to perfectly guess which one was the women's and which one was the men's. So in general, though, I'm not trying to discredit it. I know I feel like I kind of did, but I'm not trying to discredit it. I think that this was a successful year. And I think when the discrepancy between teams is not far, it's always going to be a successful year. You're always going to get good games. You're more likely to get upsets. The two things I want in order to make this a success are going to frequently happen when the teams are close at the bottom of the conference. Men's, they weren't that close. So we'll be back tomorrow. We will talk about Eddie George's legacy tomorrow. I just thought that this Deion Sanders quote was cool. It was kind of timely. I wanted to bring it up, so I did, right? So we'll be back tomorrow. I can't wait. We'll talk about Eddie George's legacy. We'll talk about some MEAC and SWAC tournament games. I don't know how we'll do it with the changing, dynamic of everything. I'll have to look at the schedule to see what's best for us, but we will talk about both the MEAC and SWAC tournament in some capacity. In the meantime, in between time, until next time that we hear each other, family, take care. Stay blessed. Peace.